fighters who sacrificed his life, Solomon Kaloshu Mahlangu, when he said that, tell my mother that I love her, and my blood will nourish the fruits of freedom. And in so doing, may I therefore take the opportunity to say, may such words of wisdom, may such words of commitment drive us and ensure that as young people, we do not fail people like Solomon Mahlangu. The structure for our debates or discussion today, we shall have inputs, and then based on those inputs, we'll then reflect on the issues that would have been raised during the inputs. Later, during the day after lunch, we will then be requested to form part of the breakaway sessions that have got identified topics that will then further allow members to engage much more broad and deeply on the issues that would have been raised at that point. I therefore take the opportunity to welcome everybody present here today, and in so doing, I had a discussion with the House Chairperson and the Deputy Speaker that initially we intended having a session of young people yesterday evening by organizing a welcoming dinner, which would have then afforded all of us an opportunity to mingle, to laugh, to share our experiences, to get to know each other. Those who would hug each other would have had an opportunity to hug each other. But later it was brought to our attention that South Africa is so, the spatial pattern of this country disadvantaged these young people to arrive in time, because others only arrived at 12 o'clock last night and so forth, and therefore we missed that opportunity of getting to know one another. I've done it the opposite way. My name is Rasireti Papi Tao, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. The speakers, as they will be coming, they will then introduce themselves. At this point, therefore, I will take the opportunity to call on the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Tsinodi Lechesa, to then make his contribution. Thank you very much.
Good morning, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. It is a particularly pleasing opportunity for a change to address the House. My name is Lechesa Tsenodi, the Deputy Speaker in the National Assembly. We do not speak in the Assembly. So this is why we value opportunities to speak. We often have to listen to Ntate Tlowama there and others speak, and we don't. So this is why it is particularly useful for a change to be in the speaking podium. Fortunately, with my colleague who will not call me to order. I'd like to take just to share with you my thinking about whatever expectations you had of what is called a keynote address. Please just throw those expectations out and just be open-minded to what I'm going to say. I'd like to, and part of the reason I'm going to do that is that there are certain assumptions that we take for granted that I'd like to challenge by the way in which I'm going to talk about matters here. And I want to apologize to you if I say things that to you are what a friend of mine calls blinding glimpses of the obvious. because I think I would like to lay the foundation for us to appreciate the nature of our democracy and what it produces. Firstly, every 5 years we go to an election, and as a result of those elections produces the composition of parliament and government. The political party that wins the majority support form the leadership of both institutions. The National Development Plan arrived here following a long consultative process, and having gotten support for it across society in general, the ANC felt that it must put it in its election manifesto, which 62% of the public agreed with it, basically, as a result of the outcome of those elections. Democracy means that at the end of the term, in this instance in 2019, the government and parliament, which the ANC was given a mandate to lead, must account as to how far they succeeded to implement the key features of the NDP. We say key features because the plan is a long-term plan. In other words, it is meant looking forward at 2030, and that it would be impossible in those 5 years to have reached the goals of the NDP. This indeed was one of the key reasons for welcoming the NDP. It introduced long-term planning, coordination of government in order government work, citizen input, and the leadership that drives these processes. Because in the assessment that was done, it was felt that work that had taken place in the past wasn't sufficiently grounded in thinking in the long term sufficiently, the consequences of the things that needed to be done, so that in the overall, we should have better public engagement and participation, but also leadership that drives work across the board, so that the impact in the long term on the problems that Ntate Tau here mentioned are impacted upon effectively. Although widely accepted, some of its diagnoses and proposals have been criticized. Parliament's job, however, has a responsibility to ensure implementation of the plan as presented to it via the medium-term strategic framework of government and the budget that accompanies it, which Parliament has to approve. One of the key tasks of Parliament is to approve the national budget. After the state of the nation by the head of state and government, evaluating past performance, the current environment, and plans to achieve, in this instance, the NDP, followed later by an allocation of resources to achieve those plans. So the national budget being one of the important reasons for the existence of Parliament, that the government will present to Parliament how it proposes to meet the goals for which they were elected and the resources that they are going to need to do that. And so Parliament approves this responsibility for approving budget, meaning the resources that are going to go towards the achievement of the goals is an important political task that Parliament and the legislatures. Without those resources, and without them being appropriately allocated, we will not be able to see the appropriate implementation of what otherwise people have, in their majority, have agreed needs to be done. This is why thinking about this task, firstly, of what has been presented to us by way of an assessment of past performance, of the current environment, and of how also globally what happens out there affects us, because we don't live in isolation to the world. We have relationships that have an impact on our ability to do things well or not to do them well. So the assessment that we receive at the beginning of each year, giving us that assessment and how what we said we want to do is a crucial part of what we must understand, and its relationship to the national budget. All committees, the majority of committees of Parliament, especially portfolio and select and standing committees, will be focused in their interaction with departments and public entities of government, and with society, in other words, with the community out there, to establish the effectiveness of implementation. And that we do through research, public hearings, oversight visit, to gather evidence which confirms or disconfirms the plans as put before us and their effective implementation, including in many instances providing us with evidence that in what we assumed were the roots of the problem may not in fact have been correct, and this is why implementation is not working. And so this is a crucial part of the work, of the interconnectedness of what we receive from the executive, and how in the work we do as different committees of the legislatures, find out there in our investigation, research, from what people are saying and the institutions that implement are saying themselves, as compared to our interaction and what we receive by way of evidence from government officials across the board. I want to suggest that often when we speak about Parliament, of course we speak about the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, but we would like to point out increasingly that in the past 20 years, an important collaborative initiative has evolved, increasing coherence of the relationship between Parliament and the 9 provinces under the auspices of the Speakers Forum. The Speaker and Deputy Speakers and Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the National Assembly and the NCOP come together with Speakers and Deputy Speakers from the 9 provinces to share experiences, to put plans to coordinate oversight. One of the problems that many of you will be familiar with, being MPs and MPLs, and also being young people operating out there, is often what is called oversight stampede. We all go to the same community, Marikana, from different committees on different dates, and that we do not coordinate that work. The results of such oversight visits to that same place to say, what are we picking out from there? Or let me put it even more dramatically. We all want to go to Brazil to go and study things there that we think we can do better here. But before we leave, we do not often come together, those of us from the country who have been to Brazil, to say, by the way, what did we pick up that is very useful, that perhaps may persuade us to cancel the trip, or if we go there, we go and look for a completely different thing altogether to check this. So this coordination of oversight visits, both domestically and externally, has been a very important item on the agenda of the Speakers Forum to see how we can do better in this area. I will reflect a little more on this later on. In addition to coordinating our oversight, basically, to go and look at whether what the government is implementing is having the effect the reports we receive are saying it is, whether it confirms them or not, is also the question of overall monitoring and evaluation in a systematic manner, including capacity building. About 3 weeks or so ago, we went to WITS to join the Vice Chancellor there and their team to congratulate graduates in the Faculty of Economics and Governance, I think it's called, which included a number of members of parliament, of the legislatures, who were graduating in programs that we have worked together around as parliament and the legislatures with WITS and other universities in the country. So that capacity building is an important part of strengthening what we call effective government requires what the NDP calls capable government, capable state. So the building of a strong state that is able to carry out its requirements require public representatives and staff in the public service, broadly speaking, who have capacity, who are trained both academically but experientially in the way in which they interact. The leadership and management of parliament and the legislatures often come together in what is referred to as SALSA, the South African Legislative Sector. Huh? Am I right? Yes. To come and share notes about, as managers and administrators, are the things that they are doing backing up public representative in the committees, in the work they do in oversight, in the work they do in monitoring and evaluation, appropriate? What are the gaps? Who has what strengths among the legislators, the legislatures, and how can we draw from those lessons of their good and best practice so that we are able to replicate that across the board? So it's a very important collaboration of parliament and the 9 provinces that is not often in the public eye, that there is such collaboration taking place to ensure better coordination of the third arm of the state, the legislative sector. Now, this is done, as I say, so that our joint and collective political and administrative resources are being brought to bear on the key task we are concerned about, which is what I've been asked to speak about, the effective implementation of the NDP. In the key pillars and responsibilities of these structures, these institutions, is that responsibility to strengthen ourselves. And we maintain that when our institutions work well alone, that is Parliament, for example, and each of the legislatures, we will be well placed as a country to impact on the lives of our people better. Because when these institutions do not do their work effectively, we undermine the possibility of pulling these resources that we do command effectively to implement what people would like to see in their lived experiences, not in the declarations in the reports. So, the other point I would like to point out, which is often in the blind spots, it's there, but we often operate as if it is not there. The Speakers Forum, each of the speakers in the 9 provinces also conduct speakers forums in each of those provinces. In other words, the speaker in the Western Cape and in Gauteng often meets with municipal speakers to look at their common concerns, for example, about oversight, about public participation dynamics and problems, about interface with provincial government and national government and so on. Because often we are told that we from national often fly into some of these cities and towns and villages and often ineffectively coordinate with local oversight committees in those cities and towns and so on. So that when we leave, what emerged from there, we were equally informed by people who on a daily basis is their task in those areas. So that's collaboration of the speakers in each province to receive information from the speakers who are responsible with interfacing with ward councillors and PR councillors who report to them, that this developing collaboration is an important institutional development which we are surfacing to emphasize the necessity for looking at it and supporting it, because it bodes well for our effectiveness of the monitoring and evaluation and oversight and accountability when we oil this evolving machinery. I thought I should also point out that the Auditor General's reports are also proving a critical instrument in the considerations that we have. The executive authority in this instance, the chairperson and the speaker, have meetings with the Auditor General, just as the Auditor General has meetings with the leadership in the councils of mayors and speakers to examine the extent to which, as political leadership, play their executive responsibility to oversee the keeping of controls, mechanism to ensure resources that are allocated are actually dealt with properly in order to effect our agreed desires. But most importantly, whether there is evidence that we have used those resources in the way in which we say we do, and whether those resources allocated to us were appropriately allocated for the intended goods. And so that where there is a gap, action must be taken. So that evolving relationship through the Auditor General is an important institutional input in overseeing our effective implementation of what we have agreed needs to be done. Being Parliament and the legislatures, the interface with citizens is absolutely crucial. Through our programs as with MPs, MPLs and councillors, we have good prospects of improving awareness and proactive work by informed citizens. The NDP envisages proactive citizens and in pursuing its goals. All the legislatures are continuously improving communications, harnessing new technology, and to do so, making our responsiveness better every time. The executive mayor of Tshwane has been boasting these days of how he has now in place on a regular basis interfaces with over 500,000 people in every 2 hours that he spends taking on through social media questions from the public. He is very conscious that many of them are so to speak, from inside the jurisdiction of Tshwane, but some of them come from outside with an interest inside the city. They use social media to ask him questions, and he responds to that. This availability is a very important one for the leadership of these councils, and, if I may say so, of all of us throughout the system, to be able to respond to people timelessly, harnessing technology so that we provide the answers that people are having. A huge number of people now exist and operate in cyberspace, and that they would like to receive that information as and when they find it appropriate. The current digital divide, given the class dividedness of our country, there's a significant number of people who are poor, who do not have access to technologies that we are talking about, needs to be surfaced and understood as an area of challenge, and the reason for why we should implement our development plans to close that gap. This point is highlighted and emphasized by the recently published International Labour Organization report that incidentally was commissioned by Stone Sizani, the current chief whip, when he was chair of the Portfolio Committee of Rural Development, so on, to examine conditions of farm workers in our country. I'm sorry. My apologies. Bad manners. My apologies. Which outlines near slave conditions of farm workers. It's an important indicator of the problem of poverty and how in very significant parts of our country we have people who do not have access to these mechanisms, but also the conditions under which they are living challenges us to actually ensure that anything that we claim we have done, if it does not include, when we count our victories, the dramatic improvement of farm worker conditions, our work will really be meaningless to their lives. So this is why that area of work is absolutely crucial. And by the way, no plan will survive the reality of ever-changing material conditions, and that astute leadership reads the environment constantly in order to adjust, to change timelessly, to speedily meet the needs of the people who we all agree deserve better. Let me conclude by saying that, therefore, what we are doing inside South Africa is an important part of the work that we are doing, pursuing policies of implementing the plan. But we've just taken a decision as Parliament to endorse a decision that was taken by the SADC Parliamentary Forum, that each of the parliaments must take a decision, a resolution, to support the SADC for each of the 5 regions in the continent, that those be regional parliaments. So we have done that. So we constitute part of the 12 countries out of 14 countries that have now resolved that SADC Parliamentary Forum be changed into a regional parliament. It's an important development so that we also look at the impact in the region, our relationship inside the region. The recent forum had a meeting focusing on industrialization. How do we ensure that the resources that we have in our countries are beneficiated in our countries, produces jobs here, that the value of this work is not captured outside elsewhere. So in the relationship we conduct internationally, the basis for those relationships must be to advance this industrialization agenda in the entire region. So that's the idea of the reason behind us agreeing, and let's build this regional parliament that will oversee the leadership in this region, follows through on those undertakings, that it's not just rhetorical political statements that has no concrete basis on the ground. I'm glad to say that under the leadership of the chairperson of the National Council of Processes, we went to Moscow to agree as one of the 5 countries that we must have a parliamentary dimension of the BRICS countries. That the undertakings that the BRIC countries are making are crucial, important, to cushion ourselves from global exploitative relationship in development to a different paradigm that ensures that the flow of finance is conducted in a different manner than it has been in the past under the World Bank and IMF. Whatever the conditions that existed in those institutions, their transformation becomes the agenda of BRICS countries, heads of state, but also that Parliament must have an interest in that thing. So that parliamentary dimension has now been formed and is going to be undertaking this work. Ladies and gentlemen, I think what I have tried to do is to suggest that the key responsibilities of Parliament and the legislatures are themselves pillars which, if we use correctly, will produce the desired effect in the outcomes of the plans that are before us. And that internationally, in our region and in our continent, and globally, those institutions, if we transform them and use them appropriately to advance the interests that people would like to see in their lived experiences, will be realized. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. You may have realized that I did take into account the appeal that this is a rare opportunity for the Deputy Speaker to speak. So I allowed him that space to engage with us. May I therefore call on Dr. Sangana to, ideally, I would have allowed you to speak from there, but these young people want to see you. Therefore, I would request that. Oh, no, Eric, after. Oh. I'm informed that this youthful choir of Parliament need to go back to their offices, but at the same time, they would want to really welcome young people from all corners of South Africa with a beautiful rendition. Don't disappoint me. We are all yours. Thank you very much for that rendition. I therefore give over to Dr. Sanga.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairperson. Deputy Speaker, Honorable Zenoli, Honorable Members of Parliament, Honorable Member of Provincial Legislature, distinguished delegates, youth workers, and young people, good morning. My name is Bernice Tlahala. I'm the Director responsible for youth development based in the Presidency Department of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation. I'm presenting to you today alignment of our National Youth Policy and the National Youth Development Plan. As you may be aware, the National Plan is founded on the 6 key pillars. The first pillar is that of mobilizing all South Africans. Secondly, active engagement of citizens in their own development, expansion of the economy and making growth inclusive, building of key capabilities, human, physical, as well as inter-institutional, building of a capable and development state, fostering of strong leadership throughout society. The reason the National Development Plan is based on those pillars is to address, amongst others, the plight of young South Africans. If you look at the population dynamics to 2013, it shows that population is projected to grow by 8.5 million to about 58.5 million in 2030. In this regard, urban population is projected to rise by 11 million to 41 million. HIV reduced life expectancy significantly up to 2000 due to the beginning of the reversal which emanated as a result of introduction of antiretroviral treatment. You can look at the demographics. They actually show that young people, they are in the majority compared to other population segments. For an example, to date in South Africa, whereas we have got young people in majority, of important to note is the fact that 42% of young people between the ages of 15 and 35 remain unemployed. And 31% of those young people, they are not in employment, education, and training. 7.3% of young people between the ages of 5 to 24 years are living with HIV and AIDS. 1 in 5 young people, about 2 million, were victims of theft. About 1 in 10 were robbed. These are actually some of the key issues that concerns us as young people. Hence, we need to look at how we can better implement their National Development Plan so that it can address the plight of young people. We know that our Vision 2030 actually aspires that in South Africa there should be no one who will live in poverty. And the unemployment rate should be reduced to a point where only 6% of the population can be unemployed. Per capita income will rise from 50,000 in 2010 to 120,000 by the year 2030. There are various specific objectives which are aligned, which are provided for in the National Youth Policy, which are aligned to the National Youth Development Plan. It was in that regard that the provisions within, taking into account the provisions within the NDP that Cabinet adopted National Youth Policy 2015-2020. And the objectives of the policy is first to foster national cohesion and acknowledge young youth diversity and provide opportunities for young people. It focuses on mainstreaming youth development into programs, policies, as well as budgets. Honorable Deputy Speaker has mentioned that there will be SADC Parliamentary Forum as well as the BRICS Parliamentary Forum. We actually anticipate that young people will be included in those forums so that they can clearly articulate their needs, because we all know that youth development is a cross-cutting issue. The other one is strengthening youth development machinery. It is important that if we are to implement successfully youth development, we need to make sure that the youth development machinery is properly oiled. Empowering young people and therefore guaranteeing a sustainable future as per NDP Vision 2030, building a culture of patriotism. By building a culture of patriotism, we are saying that we need to make sure that young people do not only look at their own development, but they also need to contribute to the development of the society of which they are a part. We also see our young people also contributing to national democratic non-sexist and a united South Africa. It was on that basis that young people said, we want a hand up, not a hand out. When you look at the status of youth at glance, with regard to education, young people remain without matric. More than 65% of young people are without matric. There is gradual increase in TVET and university entrance, but young people remain unemployed and not in school or training. And of that number, we see that about 3.5 million of those youth are affected by this. Young South Africans also remain largely unskilled compared to their white youth counterparts. So it is important that as we address the plight of young people in education, we need to take into account those differences. The fact that we have to address the needs of young people, particularly those who are who are blacks and those who are actually have previously been disadvantaged. When it comes to the issue of economic inclusion, there's a high youth unemployment rate, where you find that more than 1 in 3 young people remain unemployed. And again, there is an acceptable number of unemployed graduates. It shows that education is not also a guarantee that one will actually secure employment. So that is actually concerning, that we have got high unemployment rate, particularly amongst our graduates. There is also the issue of teenage pregnancy, which remains unacceptable. This is one of the factors which prevents young girls from accessing education and therefore needs to be closely addressed. With regard to the issue of health, there is HIV prevalence rate amongst young people, particularly those aged between the 15 and 24, about 8.7%. And there is high levels of alcohol abuse, unprotected sex, violent behaviors, as well as drug abuse. All these are social ills or social health problems that actually prevent young people from participating in education and being part of the economy. We also have high numbers of young black males who die due to unnatural causes. This is concerning given the fact that our male species already, they are a minority. Tuberculosis and HIV/AIDS also are the main causes of death. With regard to social cohesion, there is lack of sporting, cultural, and recreational facilities. It is important that young people have to play. In order to reduce risky health behaviors, we need to make sure that we breed young people who are active. Fewer young people participate in elections, stating concerns around job, service delivery, corruption, and trust. There is high apathy rate where young people don't actually form part of democratic processes. And it is important that we need to actually reverse that, because that is one of the hard-earned gains. And then the other pillar is that of a youth development machinery. There's a tendency to become more concerned about development of policies. And then we overlook at the vehicles that are critical in implementation of those policies. We are saying within the National Youth Policy, within the National Youth Policy, that it is important to oil the youth development machinery. And this will actually be in line with one of the pillars of the National Development Plan, which is to build a capable and developmental state. And in doing that, we recognize the fact that at present we do not have an adequate framework for youth work. We are saying that it is important for service providers within youth development space to be properly equipped so that they can become the agents of change and development, so that they can be able to guide young people properly. There is also persistent exclusion of young people with disabilities. What does the NYD, the National Youth Policy 2020 commit to? It commits to 5 areas: economic transformation, education and skills development, healthcare and healthy lifestyles, national unity and social cohesion, as well as optimization of youth development machineries. These are the key pillars of the National Youth Policy, and these pillars, they are closely aligned to the key pillars of the National Development Plan. In this regard, we are saying that the presidency is at the center of mainstreaming, coordinating, and performing oversight of youth development. When we look at oversight of youth development, we are talking about youth development across board. And that is where you find that in South Africa, we have actually adopted a 2-pronged approach, where you find that youth development is performed by government departments at national, provincial, and local levels. But then again, at the same time, you also find that youth development is also performed by other organs of state, such as civil society organizations, as well as private sector. So we are saying that it is important to make sure that all that is properly coordinated, so that in the end, young people can receive a coordinated package of services. Other issue is the issue of budgetary commitments. We can have all these young, nice policy imperatives in place, but if we don't have budget committed to youth development, it will remain a challenge to actually implement those. So it is important that different government departments across all spheres also budget or commit financial resources for implementation of youth development. But then we are also saying that the private sector also needs to come on board in order to assist us in implementing youth development. With regard to economic transformation, we are saying that there are various actions that we need to accelerate, which have got high impact in youth development. And these include youth employment creation, focusing on enterprise development, industrial policy, and beneficiation. It is important that we need to accelerate in order to make sure that we reverse high unemployment rate. The other issue is facilitation of first-time entrance to economy. We need to make sure that we accelerate employment of first-time entrants. Specific youth set aside in procurements, we are saying that it is important that we have youth set-asides. This is also provided for within our youth employment accord. And this will also include localized procurement. Review progress in terms of youth employment accord and employment tax incentives. The youth employment accord has been signed, and it is important that we need to regularly review its implementation. Access to land plus youth-focused empowerment in key sectors of the economy. It is important that we also focus on drawing young people in key sectors of economy, such as agriculture. On education and skills development, there's a need to improve quality of further education and training by expanding young people who actually are part of those. More funding for academically deserving students, particularly those from poor families, is important. We need to recruit graduates into the public service. It is important that young graduates are also have to see public service as an employer of choice. Commitment from SOEs to train artisans, as well as access to information through IT development. We need to attract young people in those areas, but particularly those that are scarce skills areas. Second chances, opportunities must be created for young people who are out of school, and there must be gradual introduction of free education up to university undergraduate levels. On healthcare and healthy lifestyles, we need to make sure that there is increased access to information and knowledge around sexuality issues. It is important that we need to promote healthy lifestyles, particularly looking at sexuality issues. We need to facilitate responsive information, education, counseling to adolescents, and we also need to ensure that there is overall transformation of the healthcare system, including introduction of the national health insurance. Additionally, there is a need to reduce availabilities of drugs and alcohol, particularly in schools. This is important that we need to make sure that young people do not abuse dependency-creating substances. And this will also include ensuring that we don't have taverns and shebeens next to our school facilities. We also need to build support networks for rehabilitation. Those who already are victims of substance abuse, we need to make sure that they actually access rehabilitation services. Availability of sports and recreational facilities to at all communities. These are actually important to ensure that we include young people in positive leisure activities. On national unity and social cohesion, there's a need to support and harness youth leadership at all levels and all sectors. It's important that we have to create leaders of integrity. And in this way, we are actually focusing on enhancing youth leadership. We need to confront systemic racism while encouraging dialogue amongst young people. We also need to use education, sports, arts and culture to foster integration of young people beyond racial lines. Additionally, there's a need for teaching history in schools so that the memory can actually be retained. It is important that history should actually be taught at school as part of the curriculum. The national symbols, including constitution, flag, etc., need to be promoted, particularly in various schools, so that young people can understand what those symbols actually stand for. There is a need to have a national youth service program. This is one of the key priorities for us in government. It was on that basis that we are currently looking at expanding the National Youth Service, because the National Youth Service provides young people with an opportunity to serve in their own communities, whilst in the process they are acquiring skills. The role of media and knowledge institutions also remain important. Young people are often projected as problems. So it is important that media also have to assist in promoting and projecting a positive image of young people who are not only concerned about their own development, but are concerned about the development of the broader society. On optimization of youth development machinery, we are saying that the leadership by the presidency is crucial in terms of coordination, mainstreaming youth development, and also oversight of the whole of government. It is important that the presidency must be in the forefront in ensuring that they coordinate the efforts of various key stakeholders in the youth development space. We also need to empower the National Youth Development Agency through legislative changes. In this regard, we have already started with the process of amending the National Youth Development Agency Act, so that process will actually assist us in reconceptualizing the mandate or repositioning the National Youth Development Agency so that it is responsive to the needs of all our youth. We need to ensure that all government departments have youth directorates that implements the National Youth Policy 2020. Cabinet decision in 2006 is that there's a need to have youth focal points across all government departments, strategically located. So this still needs to be implemented. We need to make sure that those youth directorates are actually in place, including within municipalities. All provinces and municipalities should also have dedicated youth service points and budgets. It is important that youth development does not remain an unfunded mandate. We need to make sure that there are actually resources that are allocated to implement youth development. We need to ensure that the budget reflects the commitment of government towards ensuring a youth-responsive society. What will it take for us to implement? There is a presidential youth working group which has been launched already by the president, and it is led by Deputy Minister in the presidency, Honorable Buti Manamela. And the Presidential Youth Working Group on Youth will oversee the implementation of government's youth development commitments. This is important because at different government departments, we've got deputy ministers who are going to be responsible to assist in ensuring that government's commitment on youth development are actually realized. There are work streams which will include implementation by all sectors. The work streams have been structured along the lines of the pillars of the 5 pillars of the National Youth Policy. The commitments in the National Youth Policy 2020 will be integrated into the MTSF attached to specific outcomes for reporting to Cabinet. We will actually be ensuring that the commitments that are contained within the policy also form part of the MTSF. The Presidential Youth Working Group on Youth will receive annual reports so that we can periodically report to the President on how we are progressing. And there is also a need to coordinate the youth focal points. We have identified the quick wins, which we are of the view that they have high impact and they can actually assist us with regard to taking youth development forward. In this regard, 1 million National Youth Service participants will actually be attracted into this program with the expansion and coordination framework in place. We are saying that we need to expand the intake of young people to National Youth Service Program to 1 million. And then 1 million SMMEs with the Maramento, which was launched last month. We are saying that small, medium, and micro enterprises, we need to make sure that they are actually jacked up. Jobs through the Youth Employment Program, we need to accelerate job creation through the Youth Employment Program. Workplace Skills Program targeting unemployed graduates as well as first-time entrants and grade 12. We need to create opportunities for young people who are entering the labor market for the first time. Reforming NSFAS and developing a clear vision for higher education. We need to make sure that young people are given aid in order for them to be able to participate in higher education. Social cohesion with a focus on sports, arts, and culture needs to be promoted. And then finally, an integrated youth development strategy and the National Youth Development Agency Act amendment needs to be finalized. As a way forward, we are saying that youth development is not the responsibility of one key stakeholders. In this regard, we are therefore saying that we need everyone involved in youth development. Government alone cannot deal with all the challenges. We need participation of civil society, we need participation of private sector, we also need participation of parastatals. All key sectors should therefore be mobilized for youth development implementation. Young people are actually an important force for youth development. And if we are to take this country forward, we need to make sure that they are mobilized and included in the development process. Youth development therefore requires radical and bold initiatives as well as interventions. Systems and measures for accountability to ensure implementation must be put in place. Nothing will move if young people are not at the center of youth development. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. We'll then proceed to receive our second input by Honorable Moai. Yes, you may come in, you'll then follow Honorable Member.
No, Chair. Forgive me, I'm not following the program, neither am I following the purpose after all the explanations we have been given about the Youth Roundtable. So I'd like your indulgence for a moment to quickly just explain, because I was under the impression that we are going to have youth formations and students and like the youth, young people that we will be hearing from and what do they want and all those things. And I mean, I'm a member of Parliament. I participate already in Parliament. I don't need to discuss how I'm going to participate in Parliament as youth. So it will be a bit, and also I don't want to come and discuss how to implement the NDP. I don't agree. We don't agree as the EFF with the NDP. We reject it. We don't think it will help.
Order, Chair.
So can you please explain to us, should I go on?
Proceed.
Yeah, just so that us who reject the NDP, which is a well-known fact, who don't agree with it and all those things, how is it envisaged? Because NDP is not a policy of Parliament, it's of government. And then two, since we started, we have not known who is here.
Right, Honorable
There's an
Josie.
order, Chair.
No.
Order.
We don't want that situation. Let's not turn the roundtable into a parliamentary session where we shall
Chair, we
have-
should follow the program.
Yes.
We must
yes.
never be derailed from the program by people who came late here.
All right. Let's do the following. The program has been presented to the gathering at the beginning, and it was agreed to, and we'll follow the program. And then at some point, we will then have a session where we'll interact and we'll raise our views on whatever would have been presented. But as we proceed now, we are then going to continue receiving the inputs as agreed to, and then we'll have that session where we'll engage now. Thank you very much. Honorable Moai. Yeah, I'm sorry, ma'am.
I'd just like to propose an amendment to the program. I think it's great that Parliament has organized this and young people can get around and talk about issues. But we've had 3 speakers now, and we haven't had a chance to engage. It's supposed to be a round table. We're supposed to be talking together. Right now, we're being talked at. So can we ask questions to the speaker that's just presented?
Honorable members, we are getting back to the same issue, that the program as presented was agreed to. There were no objections earlier on, even before we started. Can we proceed in the following way? As and when we continue receiving our inputs, the presenters are still here. They are not going to go anywhere. We just make our notes and so forth.
But there's
And
no
then-
youth here. I mean, Honorable Likota, are you youth?
Honorable
There are
member-
no young people here. Where is the SARS co-president? Where are the youth formations
Honorable
where is
Ndosi.
COSAS?
Honorable Ndlozi,
We're talking to ourselves here.
Honorable
will
Ndlozi,
not be undermined.
Where are the young people of South Africa to come give us a
Mbuyiseni.
mandate?
Honorable
They're
Ndlozi.
not here.
Mbuyiseni, you're undermining.
You chairperson, you're not young. Why is it not chaired by a young person?
Well, no.
You're
Let's
not young.
let's
Mbuyiseni, we're
allow-
not here for
let's-
you.
Honorable members, may we not allow ourselves to degenerate?
There are no young people here. Now I want to hear from the youth, not you.
If
We want to
I'm-
clarify this young man.
Order, honorable members, can we not take hands? We'll come to that interactive point where we'll engage. We'll come to that. How honorable
Just
Ndlozi
clarify us. We're
How-
asking a question.
how-
We just want an explanation.
Honorable Ndlozi,
Maybe
Who
we
is
don't
us?
understand.
Hey, this man is an individual here. There is no
Speak
us.
as an individual, we are not us. Speak as an individual, you are not us.
honorable members, May we allow?
The 1.1 million voters of South Africa. I never
not
speak as
going
an
to give you
individual.
space,
Obviously, it's not talking to you. You are not
1.1
youth.
million people. Where are young
Us
people?
is youth. Us is used by us. Honorable
Honorable
Ndlozi
Ndlozi.
refers to us youth by us.
Honorable Josie.
Can we not be held at ransom by Muiseen also?
No. I'm not going to respond to a question that seek then to question whether if I'm young or not. That's another process. Honorable members, can you allow Honorable Mohai to make the presentation? Can you continue, Honorable Mohai?
Chair,
Thanks, Chair.
Chair. Can we also indicate that as young people and leaders of young people, we don't want spokespersons. We are here for that matter. The leadership of the South African Youth Council, which is an apex body of all civil society youth formations, is here, leading a delegation of young people. And so, can we dwell on the content of the session?
Thanks very much, Chairperson. On that note, that the youth will speak for itself, I will begin my presentation, Chair.
But the youth
Chairperson,
council is non-existent.
Chairperson, first let me recognize the leadership of Parliament here. Yourself, Deputy Chair of the NCOP, and Honorable Lechesa, and recognizing all members from different parties as members of Parliament, colleagues, comrades. I think this is an important matter that we're dealing with today, and it is an honor to contribute to this timely discussion on strengthening oversight for the advancement of the National Development Plan, focusing on youth. And I believe that all stakeholders are grateful for this opportunity of convening of the roundtable by the leadership of Parliament to discuss face-to-face with structures to share their concerns and raise critical issues regarding the implementation of the NDP. And the matter of the NDP and the youth is a burning question. Thanks. So, according to the NDP, nearly 70% of the population in Africa is under the age of 30. South Africa also has a large working age or economically active population. This can be advantageous. This can be advantageous if a conducive environment exists for this strata to actively participate economically. The NDP continues to caution that this will only be possible if the number of working age individuals can be in productive activities, with a consequent rise in level of average income per capita. If South Africa fails to do this, its large youth cohort could pose a serious threat to social, political, and economic stability. In fact, the 20th review of government recognizes that young people account for almost 2/3 of the unemployed, thus bearing the brunt of unemployment. I think Dr. Hlagala has shared this very useful statistical data and government proposed interventions. In fact, the 20-year review of government recognizes that young people account for almost 2/3 of the unemployed, thus bearing the brunt of unemployment. The review continued to indicate that NYDA places the figure of young people who are neither in an educational institution nor in employment at 2.8 million. These young people remain on the margins of society and are vulnerable to risks such as violence, crime, and substance abuse. Just further to highlight the matter raised by 20-year review, the recent survey also suggests that these affected young people are disengaged from conventional forms of political participation such as voting or communication with elected officials, and more likely to engage in service delivery protests and political violence. There are general consensus that the major problems facing South Africa's youth relate to the triple crisis of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. In fact, according to data from Statistics South Africa, age and poverty are also intertwined. Youth aged 18 to 24 will become a trickling time bomb. Compatriots, the picture I'm painting above doesn't seek to spread hopelessness, nor it is intended to conform to the narrative of viewing young people as a burden or indeed a problem. To the contrary, the intention is to highlight the depth of the problem in order to find solution to the underlying structural problems. As stated in the RDP, Reconstruction and Development Program 1994 document, and reiterated in the National Development Plan, no political democracy can survive and flourish if the mass of our people remain in poverty. Without land, without tangible prospects for better life, attacking poverty and deprivation must therefore be the first priority of a democratic government. That's what the NDP says. The youth constitute the majority of our population and are most affected by these challenges. And the country has a duty to resolve such challenges. It is in fact what the ANC stalwart Oliver Tambo, who once said, "A nation that doesn't value its youth has no future or doesn't deserve one." What should therefore be the role of oversight structures in securing this future? Both the NDP and the National Youth Policy have correctly identified education, skills development, labor absorption, and support for entrepreneurship as key strategies for youth development. In the age of knowledge economy, the innovation and creativity of youth needs to be propelled not only as unskilled job seekers, but as drivers of thriving economic initiatives. The structural problems that exist in our economy relate to barriers of entry, concentration of ownership in few hands of the excessive monopolies. These are among fundamental problems that need to be systematically confronted and changed to eliminate the skewed pattern of economic ownership. A view on what should be the role of the legislative sphere. The NDP dedicated a brief section on the role of oversight and accountability. And its views were scathing on the legislative sector in respect to Parliament. The NDP contends that, and I quote, "There are concerns about whether Parliament is fulfilling its role in building an accountable and responsive state. Regarding provincial legislatures, the NDP argues that they need to be robust and shine the light on issues of the poor and uneven performance, and the NDP concludes that this will not happen as long as provincial legislatures are seen primarily as a rung on their way to the national level. If provincial legislatures are not seen to fulfill this accountability function, it is inevitably that questions will be asked about their utility to governance of the country. On municipalities, the question of separation between executive and legislative powers in municipal governance is raised within the NDP, and a recommendation for role clarification is advanced. And I believe, Chair, that's why it is useful to have our colleagues from SALGA who participated at different levels of the legislative sphere. Therefore, the NDP is critical of the effectiveness of the legislative arm in respect to oversight and accountability. And it is important, I think, that we grapple with this issue at the level of the legislative sector. What role, what oversight mechanisms do we put in place to advance these issues? It's so critical. Rather than view the critique as a negative, it would be proper to strengthen the role of Parliament within the rubric of developmental state thesis. Developmental states are strong, active, and are capacitated to direct developmental trajectory. Located within the developmental state thesis, the role of an activist parliament is paramount. So this should not be just a ritual. And I think the ANC places this as a very important strategic trust of Parliament, particularly in the fifth term. An activist parliament, People's Parliament, advances the national interest, understands oversight and accountability as a continuous process of cooperative governance. The traits of an activist People's Parliament include creating a platform for robust but constructive debates, sustained oversight and outreach, as well as enhancing rollout of basic services to the population. However, the activist parliament, through its oversight committees, needs to exercise its constitutional powers to ruthlessly confront the bureaucratic inertia and failure to meet targets. The NDP is an aspirational vision with various proposals and concrete steps must be taken to realize its objectives. So the Activist People's Parliament, having adopted the NDP, needs to reinforce the executive in the implementation process. The legislative sector must pay particular attention to youth, both rural and urban, as well as women and disabled. That's the developmental trajectory that we take. I think this point clarifies that the NDP is our policy, and we agree that it's not a Bible, and it was adopted here in Parliament. It was tabled here. That's why the MTSF clarify exactly how government should implement the NDP. So I do not understand the notion that is raised in passing that the NDP is an unknown visionary statement of government for 2030. As legislators, we have priorities. We have prioritized increase in per capita expenditure on youth development. Profound synergy in policies, budgets, and operational plans ought to be established for measurable progress indicators for oversight to focus on tangible deliverables. In approving money bills, the legislative arm needs to ensure that appropriate funds, capacity, and competence is adequate to fulfill the developmental agenda, in particular for the youth. The youth developmental agenda cannot be viewed in isolation from broader socio-economic developmental objective as the youth is an integral part of our society. I think this point has always been expressed, particularly within the party that I belong to, that youth development is not an add-on, but should be mainstreamed on our agenda. Oversight and accountability requires capacity to conduct comprehensive and substantive analysis of performance and accounting reports. Effective oversight needs to be located within coordinated system between and within various oversight structures across spheres. In addition, it requires capability of tracking and monitoring executive compliance with stated objectives, and importantly, compliance with committee and House resolutions. A system for each committee to report on its oversight work in respect to youth focus and other designated groups is a necessary requirement going forward. Chair, I think the point I'm canvassing here is that we'll need really to elevate, find a mechanism, how do we consistently report on matters that affect youth in a systematic way. By way of concluding, a bold, comprehensive and systematic approach to oversight and accountability represents a better prospect for Parliament to play its role in fulfillment of NDP youth development focus. The legislative arm of government must reinforce the progressive ideals emanating from government policies and programs to eliminate the deep-seated challenges confronting the youth. The NDP and the youth policy are not mutually exclusive, and the profound synergies need to be harnessed through oversight as well as sustained public involvement as requirement in the model of an activist parliament. Clearly, the consolidation of our democracy moving forward is dependent on progress we make on our economic front. Youth participation, as I alluded, is critical. And young people have to participate meaningfully in measures to change the basic structures of economy in terms of ownership, management, skills, and employment, gender, even geography. I'm raising this geography because wherever you locate, whatever social or economic programs, that's not a socially neutral activity, but is intended to solve the glaring question that is facing young people, that they find meaningful participation in economy. So giving concrete life to activist parliament should remain our strategic task in this 5th parliament. And thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mohai. Then that allows us to take the 3rd input and then allow the interactive discussions. Honorable Mr. J. Fala. Either way, you're welcome.
Okay, Honorable Deputy Chair of the NCOP, Honorable Deputy Speaker of Parliament, honorable members of the legislator, and honorable members of the NCOP, respected colleagues from the South African Youth Council, fellow practitioners across the spectrum, and young people of South Africa, warm greetings, and thank you for this privilege of appearing at this critical forum. I come from the Department of Small Business Development. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy working on projects, so I'm not very used to the protocol and etiquette associated with addressing forums of this nature, so please forgive me if I offend anyone at any level. I have to say that I'm asked here to talk about inculcating a culture of entrepreneurship amongst youth to sort of eradicate poverty and unemployment. And I'm going to talk specifically to programs that we are implementing, because I said I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy, okay? I think firstly I have to actually say that we must salute our Constitution, because it promotes no discrimination on the basis of sex, on the basis of race, and most of all, on the basis of age, okay? I think it's very, very, very important to understand that. Secondly, I'm going to speak in a very focused manner about programs that focus on youth economic participation, because a young life starts and ends with that young life's ability to participate effectively in the economic mainstream. So I think when we actually look at young people in this country, it's really important to note that young people should not be referred to as previously disadvantaged. We must change our thinking. Young people may have been previously disenfranchised, but they are currently very much disadvantaged. With those few sort of opening sort of comments, I'd like to launch into the presentation that I have for you. This presentation is based on the programs of the Department of Small Business Development. And the kind of things I'll be dealing with is what is the specific focus of the department on youth enterprise development or youth business development. Secondly, I'll try to show from a perspective of our sort of department and our focus, how we are aligning our youth programs to the department's overall vision of promoting small business or small enterprises in the country. And secondly, I try to show how we are linking our programs, okay, on youth enterprise development or youth economic participation through enterprise and small business to the National Development Plan objectives. I'll then go on into talking about specific programs that we are implementing to give you a taste and an understanding of the scale and scope of the projects that we are trying to implement, and then finally conclude with some challenges that we are experiencing at the moment. I think in a sense, the Department of Small Business Development is fortunate in that it does have a youth focal point or youth directorate. And there are specific objectives defined for this. And these include a large range of issues relating from policy and instruments with regard to youth participation in enterprise, through to developing very specific programs, rolling out Commitment 5 of the Youth Accord, which focuses on youth entrepreneurship and cooperatives, trying to work on intergovernmental spheres, intergovernmental sort of collaboration, both between government departments and across the different levels of government, or spheres of government. We're also hoping to grow into the role where we become a focal point on talking to issues with regard to how youth enterprise is progressing in this country, and being able to actually measure on a year-on-year basis as to how we can measure the performance of youth enterprises in contributing to our GDP and employment creation. The rationale for this focus on youth enterprise development within the department, very briefly, we know that 33% of the businesses in South Africa are owned by people, young people between the ages of 16 and 35. We also know that almost 2/3 of these young people are self-taught in terms of their business skills. You know, less than 2% of our youth entrepreneurs are actually basically, you know, saying that they got assistance or were reported that they had tertiary education institutions as a source of skills and training. And almost 80% of the businesses owned by young people are not registered. Now, I digress for a moment, because even though these businesses are not registered, okay, by the classical definition, okay, and are regarded as informal, from a perspective of the level of sophistication that young people are engaging in these businesses, they certainly are not informal, okay? And this dilemma leaves us with a problem where we have to look at ways of finding ways to actually provide business development services, both financial and non-financial, to young enterprises that may not be formalized, okay? And we are adopting a position of providing support and services to these businesses in a manner that allows organic growth, okay? And through this growth, okay, these businesses will move towards formalization when it's something that they want to do from within, so they can access more formal forms of economic opportunities like procurement opportunities, tenders, and the like. I think all of these factors that I've just described, okay, tell us that we need to look at very unique programs that address the needs of young people. We also need to be able to mainstream existing mechanisms, okay, so that, okay, these programs are more accessible to young people. Now, when I say mainstreaming, I know many people take it as a given, but in my simple mind, mainstreaming means, firstly, if there are programs out there, okay, these programs should have targets that focus on how many or how much of these programs actually should be directly targeting youth. Maybe a 30% target, maybe a 50% target, okay? They should have clear targets. These programs, with those targets, should actually make sure that the criteria for accessing these programs are very much flexible, so that they do not constrain young people from qualifying for these programs of support. And then thirdly, when I'm talking of mainstreaming, okay, I'm talking about embedding service delivery and programs in a way, in your sort of service delivery in such a way that youth is the focus. I mean, if youth make up 70% of the population, and 70% of our population is under the age of 35, okay, if we miss the youth target, we're basically not servicing this country, okay? When we look at our department, okay, I'm going to look at the vision and mission very quickly. Our vision is a radically transformed economy through effective development and increased participation of SMEs and cooperatives in the economic mainstream. And when we look at that vision, what we're doing as a department is we are focusing on developing very unique and specific programs to upscale and fast-track the mainstreaming of youth in the economy. And one of these programs is the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program, which I'll talk a little bit more later. Secondly, the mission of the department is to create that conducive environment, okay, through provision of enhanced financial and non-financial support services and a range of other services. And towards this end, okay, we are also looking at taking existing schemes of support that are available in the institutional environment within the Small Business Development Department, within the DTI, within the Department of Economic Development, okay? And what we're trying to do is to really make sure that these are mainstream so that they gear towards meeting the youth needs and youth challenge. Now, from a sort of policy perspective, there are several things that basically indicate that we're trying to align as a department with the National Development Plan, okay? I think we are largely guided by the National Development Plan and Outcome 4 of the Medium-Term Strategic Framework, okay, which calls for the creation of decent employment through inclusive economic growth. Our draft National Youth Policy 2015 to 2020, okay, also enjoins all spheres of government to mainstream youth economic development in a way that provides, that actually allows youth development in general okay, through the socio-economic and relevant contextual factors to develop programmatic interventions that are appropriate. Okay, the National Small Business Act, okay, also provides for a full range of enterprise development options that can be applied to the youth sector. Now, all of these broad sort of framework of legislation is integrated into the Youth Enterprise Development Strategy that the department has developed, okay? And this Youth Enterprise Development Strategy is available on the website. It's not just a strategy aimed at practitioners, okay, but it also explains the rationale behind the programs that we try to initiate. I think what's very important is we've taken the strategy, okay, which is available in its entirety, and we've taken this strategy and put it into a simplified booklet in 4 or 5 different official languages, okay? And it's also accessible. And the program, this particular booklet tells you what the programs are specifically and gives, hoping to encourage access. I know with all of that legislative and policy things, it can get quite confusing, especially to myself. I think, let me focus on some of the programs we're doing that actually are directed at inculcating entrepreneurship amongst youth in the hope of eradicating poverty and addressing unemployment. Firstly, we have the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program. I'm just going to outline that. I'm just going to basically list them, and then I will speak to each of them. We have the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program. We have a youth mainstreaming program through transversal agreements. We have sector-specific youth catalytic projects. We have high-impact Youth Month short-term projects. We have youth enterprise development workshops, and we've got youth financial support instruments. Now, the things I'm outlining to you are not planned that we're going to do in the future. It's things that we are doing now, okay? And I think that's very important, because being a young department, to be able to come to the fore and try and implement these programs, I don't think everything is perfect, but I do think that we are certainly making an effort. Let's go into the first program that I actually talked about, which is the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program. Now, this is a flagship program of the Department of Small Business Development, okay, in that it's designed to engage young entrepreneurs over a 2-year period, right, while providing a 12-month CETA-accredited sort of entrepreneurship certificate, that's a new venture creation certificate, okay. Thereafter, developing a business plan, sourcing of funding, business launch, and post-program support. This aim of this program is to aid, okay, the creation of jobs through entrepreneurship and through enterprise, okay, that young people own. This program is directly called for in the National Youth, the revised National Youth Policy 2015 to 2020, which on page 24 calls that the Department of Small Business Development develop such a program. I think what's also very, very important is the very same National Youth Policy, revised National Youth Policy, also asks the Department of Small Business Development, in conjunction with the Department of Economic Development, to conduct a comprehensive survey of the state of small business in South Africa, because that information is sadly lacking. Okay. This program, the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program, okay, also recognizes, okay, and attempts to contribute towards the fulfillment of the Youth Employment Code, which is Commitment 4, and which calls for government support to youth entrepreneurship and cooperatives, and also measures to address unemployment and young people's participation in the economy. So I think that's the first program that, is of importance that we're actually implementing. The second program I want to talk about is our youth mainstreaming program. Now, within the context of our youth mainstream program, we are focusing on 9 economic cluster departments, 9 provincial departments of economic development, 11 state-owned enterprises, okay, who will all be capacitated in a mainstreaming framework. In other words, we will demystify the issue of mainstreaming amongst government departments and parastatals. We will tell them what mainstreaming means. We will give them a template and tools as to how they can go about mainstreaming in their particular government department or parastatal organization. I think this mainstreaming is very, very important, because once we've capacitated them in the framework and in the tools of mainstreaming, we will monitor on a quarter-to-quarterly basis, okay, very importantly, that 30% of their service delivery and program beneficiaries are youth, and even more importantly, that 30% of their programmatic funding, or their procurement funding, is spent directly on youth enterprises. And I think that's extremely, extremely important to give effect to the presidential directive of ensuring that there's 30% procurement directed towards our young people and to SMEs in particular. The third sort of group of programs that I want to talk about is sector-specific catalytic projects. Now, these projects create high impact through leveraging existing opportunities in priority sectors and infrastructure development programs of government that is expressed in the Industrial Action Plan, Industrial Policy Action Plan of the DTI, and the Regional Industrial Development Strategy. When a sector is defined, when a sector is defined as high priority, it means the sector has a very strong ability to contribute to GDP growth and to contribute to employment creation. So I'll give you an example of some of the projects. The first project that we are implementing focuses on the renewable energy sector. We've taken villages in sort of rural KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. We've trained young people who formed cooperatives in the sort of installation, maintenance, and repair of solar heating geysers, okay? And then we partnered with the Department of Energy, and we are, through this partnership with the Department of Energy and local municipalities, we are offering these cooperatives 5-year contracts to actually roll out the installation of this renewable energy sort of equipment, in these villages, and it provides these cooperatives with access to sustainable business for a period of 5 years. Another project we actually initiated is Youth Spaza Cooperatives, okay? The reason why we're actually doing this is in response to some of the sort of xenophobic, or should we say, some of the unhealthy sort of relationships that have been accruing between South Africans and foreign entrepreneurs who are running spazas. What we've done is we have assessed foreign-owned spazas from a range of different perspectives and compared that to our own, okay? We understand exactly what the size of a foreign-owned spaza is compared to a South African-owned. We understand what the differences are with regard to startup capital. We understand what the differences are with regard to the sort of product range and things. And we are working on actively trying to make our cooperatives and our spazas much more competitive, from providing them with the kind of infrastructure and support services that will enable them to be cooperative on all fronts when competing with these foreign-owned spazas. Thirdly, we understand that government has ring-fenced about 2.9 billion for the digital sort of migration process, okay? And I think government will be providing 5 million poor households, okay, with these digital satellite boxes that they will subsidize. What we've done is we're initiating about 40 youth-owned cooperatives that will be sort of branded by Alltech, but owned by these cooperatives, and they will be responsible for the installation, sales, and technical maintenance skills provided to the rollout of this digital satellite migration program. And it will at least create about 500 jobs for young people who will benefit directly from this program of government. Finally, with regard to broaching the issue of getting young people to participate in franchising, we've initiated 10 Shishanyama franchises in the Gauteng region. We've rolled out 7 of them. 3 of them are in the process of being rolled out. One of the cooperatives has actually failed. It has been rolled out, but through governance and various other challenges, the cooperative has actually closed that franchise store. But we're not deterred by the fact, because we're trying to understand what does it take to get young people into franchises. I think it's very, very important that this program is being replicated as we speak in the Western Cape Flats region and surrounding areas like Khayelitsha, Guguletho, Mandalay, Mitchell's Plain, Langa, Nyanga, Strandfontein, Greenfields, Philippi East, okay? We actively trying to work and understand what does it take okay, in terms of getting young people to be involved in franchises, okay. We also very actively participate in high-impact youth short-term projects, like, for instance, very active program of Youth Month programs, and we've got more than 10 or 11 activities during Youth Month that we participated in, and we had ministerial involvement in many of these activities, okay. I think very importantly, we're also trying to collaborate very actively with provincial structures, the previous office, departments of economic development, provincial departments, provincial offices of the NYDA in promoting a level of collaboration and strategic partnership across the different levels of government to implement national programs at both a national and a provincial and a district level. So we're trying to make sure there are joint programs run at every level in government in priority areas like the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program and our mainstreaming program. Okay. We've got financial instruments, the Youth Business Development Support Scheme, which will be launching this year with a fund of 20 million rands, and I think that will actually provide a lot of access to young enterprises. Finally, our challenges, we've got serious budgetary constraints, but we're not complaining. We are looking at innovative ways to address these with regard to implementation. We're looking at transversal agreements and public-private partnerships to unlock resources for implementation. Secondly, I think we're still a new department, and we really have a lot to learn. So we're still refining and honing our programs, okay? I think thirdly, coordination with provinces is a problem, okay? There are different levels of learning and systemic guiding that need to occur between projects, between provinces, national provinces, district level, and local municipal level. And then finally, I must say, we are constantly learning as to what are the mechanisms of support that we need to put in place to grow youth enterprises. And I think as a department, we're fairly confident that we will get a handle on these things and start making a difference right now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Honorable members and also the representatives of youth formations present here, and also guests who may be in the room. My name is Togo Didiza. I'll facilitate this session for now until lunch, which would really be allowing all of you, where possible, to ask questions, and I'll ask that we are brief so that we can give an opportunity to as many of us as is possible to do so, but also making comments where necessary, because it's not really just a matter of question and answer. Firstly, I would like to apologize to all of you for an information overload, I guess. There has been more inputs without allowing you some space to discuss, but I guess it was necessary for some of us who may not be in Parliament or have access to such information on a daily basis. So we do understand that some of us here, this might be repetitive, we might have heard it for many times, but others, it is for the first time. So we're trying to squeeze in a one-day session what could have actually happened in 2 days workshop. So, apologize on behalf of the organizers, and I hope that you would appreciate what we're trying to do. As indicated earlier, what we sought to do, as opposed to what had been the case before in terms of the sectoral parliament, particularly for youth, was to avoid a situation where people will just come and speak and then sit down, but to allow for an opportunity for an engagement among yourselves as participants. So this is the first time. There might obviously be some glitches, and we hope that you will be able to give us some proposals on how best we can improve the situation for the future. As part of our engagements, particularly in the afternoon, we hope that we'll be able to get some focused resolutions on how we take this process forward. What are the resolutions that you would like to make as young people on how we need to implement what we have agreed broadly as our future development plan, the NDP 2013. As I was reflecting on this session, I actually looked around the room and saw some of us who are now, in terms of young parliamentarians, have passed the age. The youth parliamentarian, actually, in terms of international standard, is 45. Yes, young parliamentarians, as opposed to a definition of youth in terms of international standard. So all of you who are 45 and under, you're still covered. But some of us who are above 45, when I actually look back and saw Comrade say so, I remembered the young people who were the first cohort of young parliamentarians in 1994. One of the things they did was to say, not about us, but with us. It is that journey that these young people walked through in trying to define what should be the youth policy and the youth development agenda for South Africa. And I think we all owe it to them because they were the pioneers at that early age. So the product of what we have heard from the Youth Commission in 1996 and the NYDA and so on were really young people, if I were to call, were the architects of their own journey. So today they may be beyond 45, but they were the pioneers. And I think we will be the pioneers also for those who will come after us, who would look back at the mark that we had placed as young people of South Africa today in ensuring that the 2013 development agenda is not about us, but with us at the helm. Open for discussions, questions, answers. I will take 5 from this side and then take 5. Mkongi, Mwabene. Mbele, Kaji, and yes, the first 5. I've noted the other 5. Can we start? Okay.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think the first thing that we need to do at this roundtable is to welcome the presentations. All the presentations from all presenters. I mean, they are well informed and they are giving us a foundation for discussion. But I think it's very important at the beginning to say that the National Development Plan was adopted by Cabinet. And it formed part of the medium-term strategic framework of government. And therefore, as Parliament, our first responsibility is to help the executive accountable in terms of the implementation of the strategic plan and their departmental programs of action. So it is okay and correct for us to sit here and check how are we going to make the departments to account on the implementation of the NTP, especially on the matter relating to youth development. That is the first one. The second one, Chairperson, that I don't want us to miss is what is our role in the implementation of Africa Agenda 2063 in relation to the NDP, because our National Development Plan talks to the strategic, objectives of the Africa Agenda 2063, so we must not miss that. The third one that I wanted to propose that it must not miss is that in July, on the 27th to the 28th of May, 2015, there was an Interparliamentary Union Global Conference on young parliamentarians that took resolutions that talked to the matters that the NDP talks to. 1, the question of economic transformation. 2, the question of social transformation, and 3, the question of young people in conflict and violence. So I think that is a framework that this parliament must work with in order to realize the objectives of the National Development Plan. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to everyone around the table, honorable members, the leadership of the Youth Council and other youth formations present. Chair, I will not dwell much more in analyzing the NDP, except to say from what has been presented today here, the list of things that have been given to us, to me it says, if we want to realize, want to see all these things being achieved, then there's no time to sleep for everyone who's here. Whether we're a member of parliament, the executive we should account, civil society, because to me, if we speak of the NDP 2030, it says to me it's 15 years from now. And Youth Policy 2020, that is to say, it's almost 5 years from now. Then what kind of input or energy we must put in order to make sure that we achieve these things? But let me just pose one question to the first presenter. When she spoke about the teaching of history in schools, which to me is very important if we want to inculcate the spirit of patriotism among our youth. But then how do we make sure that the history books that we are talking about are updated? Because to say history must be taught at schools, yet we have history books containing something that you are not proud of, will not be really taking us to where we want to go. How do we make sure that we lobby those academics, those historians, to make sure that our history is a true reflection of what the society or the country is? Because at this stage, to tell someone, to tell my younger brother that Jan van Riebeeck discovered Cape of Good Hope, to me it says we are not really taking the country forward, because we continue to perpetuate those Western lies. So it's more of the kind of a research that should go there to the history books. How do we make sure that we update it?
Thank you. Belle.
Ngiyabonga Sihlalo. I have 2 questions. The first one is to Dr. Slagala. A very good presentation. I did quite enjoy that. Lot of useful information and the framework that is outlined for driving and championing youth development seems quite coherent. But the one thing that was missing for me in this presentation was the issue of accountability for performance in all of these programs and all of these policy points. So in other words, you know, we can always do better. There's always room for improvement in terms of more budgets, you know, tweaking programs, maybe introducing some fundamentally different ones. There's certainly been a bit of a great step forward with the youth employment tax incentive in that regard. But what happens? What are the consequences for the departments and other relevant stakeholders who don't pull their weight, who don't fulfill their role in terms of driving forward the youth development agenda? In particular, given that the Departments of Monitoring, Planning and Evaluation, in doing the impacts assessments, comes out with objective and accurate reviews of what the performance has been, and the DGs sign performance agreements with the president. How do we go the step beyond that when we find that there has been underperformance, there has been a failure to meet targets in a substantive way? where is and how do we bring in more strongly the elements of ensuring strong accountability for performance in all of the elements that were in the presentation? And then just the second question, is to Mr. Vala. It's just, can I please see again in this presentation those 5 points that were in the presentation relating to, the programs to inculcate a culture of entrepreneurship among the youth. It started with Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program. I just want to capture those 5 points. And also if I can request if we can get hard copies of that presentation from the Department of Small Business Development, that's quite useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. My name is Wonderboy Kaji, from Wonderboy Kaji, from Disabled Youth South Africa. My submission will be that I see that there is economical transformation or economic transformation. I would say it will be good if the word put there to be inclusive economic transformation, because there is a youth with disabilities which are left behind in the development of a country, which we feel that when the country is going forward, and then there is this set of people that are left behind. And also to engage with the civil society that dealing straight with the society or with people there in communities. I think it will be assisting, because you will find that we have nice policies, nice domestic laws, and also UN conventions, but in terms of implementation, we have difficulties because we are not interacting with civil societies and we are not empowering them in order to be able to be viable and to be a strong leaders of society that can give information to the leadership that is in the position of government that is leading the country. For instance, we have the problems of access to the infrastructure, and in order to be educated, for instance, when we go to universities, most previous disadvantaged universities, you'll find that there are a lot of stairs. It's difficult to move with your wheelchair. It's even difficult to go to the classroom, in extent that you end up quitting, going to the special made school there, while you can be able to study with people who does not have those disabilities. You can be able to study, but the environment is not accessible for you. So if there can be an interaction with the civil society to check how can we be able to do an inclusive economic development. Now we are having a bank that is coming now, which there will be some funds that are coming to South Africa in order to develop our country. So now if we don't know how our society is structured and what are the problems of our society that we are dealing with, it will be difficult to use wisely those funds that maybe we can get from Brick Bank, and also I think the regional bank of SADC will come to be viable along the way. And also our economy is still structured.
The last one now?
This is the last one. Our economy is still structured according to the apartheid system, because we'll find that it's a particular race that you can get in a particular society. For instance, in shacks, it's only a particular race that you can get there. There is a particular race that you cannot get there in those shacks. So I'm saying if we can interact with civil society and empower them in order to make an inclusive economic development, talking more special about people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Jacob Kawe, member of the Gauteng legislature. My comment would be on the, perhaps consolidating from what the chair started from.
Can the IT people check the...
Okay, thank you. The issue of the establishment of the Parliamentary Multi-Party Forum, perhaps focusing on youth. I want to support that view with the perhaps two issues that I think should be the agenda for that forum. One of that agenda should be about assessing whether we're doing fine on legislation between parliaments and provinces. Because most of the time, youth issues, Parliament uses Section 75, if I'm not wrong, which doesn't give provinces a lot of space to comment on that. And you find that these national policies create some gap between work done at the provincial level and national level. Even though one had participated in the processes of centralizing youth development, but it has actually created a vacuum at a provincial and local government level. And I think that the first role of that structure should be to really monitor the coordination between all the structures from an oversight point of view. And that's why I want to adopt that. Second to that, it's the question of the report assessment. If we were to set targets and talk about what is it that each department, each province, or the national government is doing, we should be, from parliamentary point of view, produce an annual report which demonstrate our oversight role and indicate the performing and the non-performing in that regard. Because if we don't do, and I'm following on the latter speaker in terms of the performance agreement and performance management. So I'm supporting the notion, or the proposal rather, of the structure. The second point, which is my last point, it's really on the pillars that are presented. And I'm excited on the pillar on expansion of economy and making growth inclusive. But two things for me that come as perhaps weakness in terms of the state intervention. It's the it's how we not pursuing private sector to be a player in this regard. It's quite easy for private sector to invest in JSE than to invest on any industrial development program. And we're not there. So private sector is a bit quiet, and no one is actually intervening in that regard. And I want to suggest that part of the resolutions of this session would be about an engagement with the private capital and expressing an opinion, or of course not opinion on my view, but it could be opinion for other people, a conviction that private sector is absent deliberately, and that it's leaving government on its own, and the presentation affirms that if government was the only player, certainly we're not going to resolve this matter. My last point on the economy, it's on the informal sector, and I like the last presentation because it did acknowledge that majority of young people do participate in that economy. So perhaps when we talk about the local economy or the township economy, focus largely should be on assisting those who are active in the informal sector with specific targets from the economic department as to how do we then assist that sector to.
Thank you very much. I will take 5 on this side, and then we'll ask the presenters who have been asked questions to make their comments. Already the 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, at the back there, 5. In that order.
Ndiyabulela sihlalo, molweni nonke, igama lami nguTerry Stander, Member of Parliament. Madam Chair, very quickly, my 3 points are that today we are discussing contributions and ideas towards assisting youth, but the broader issue of good governance prevents the realization of these objectives. Because in some of the slideshows, the NDP showed that the priorities are youth and education, youth and safety, youth and health. And if we take safety, for example, we don't have a police service that is adequately trained and equipped to deliver proper policing services. In terms of healthcare, our clinics and public health institutions aren't functioning as they should. If we look at education and the grotesque failure of education over the last 21 years to properly prepare youth for taking advantage of opportunities later on in their life has probably been the greatest failure. So when you have a collapse of good governance, then you are going to see the implications of that in various ways, and it will prevent us from achieving the objectives. The other point that I wanted to make is that there was the issue of budget and a lack thereof. And South Africa has enough money. We are a wealthy country. We are a diverse country. We can do anything that we put our minds to. The talent of our youth and our people is incredible, and it inspires hope. But unfortunately, corruption steals that money, and that is the only reason why issues and complaints of lack of budget are present. The third thing is that today's discussion is around the NDP. Now, how much support do we actually have for the NDP? Because that is what this discussion is limited to, the NDP. But then you get different sectors within government itself that are at odds with one another in terms of whether we support the NDP or not. So if this dialogue is going to happen within the framework of NDP, how do we ensure that there is buy-in from the various government departments, etc., to actually implement it? So those are my three concerns, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Pumzile Van Dam. I'm a member of Parliament. My comments and questions are directed to Dr. Hlagala from the Youth Desk at the Presidency. I too also quite enjoyed your presentation. It's good to see that there's all these plans for youth development involving various departments. But what was also lacking for me is the implementation. How is this going to be implemented? What are the deadlines? We heard the what, but we need to know the when and how. And then also I was kind of hoping that in your presentation we'd discuss the targets that the NDP has set for youth development. The NDP aims to create 11 million jobs in the next 20 years. We're currently in the first phase of the NDP, which is 2012 to 2017. And a target for the first phase for youth development is making sure that more young people are absorbed into the economy. Over the last couple of years, youth unemployment has in fact grown. So are we going to achieve the targets that the NDP has set for youth development? It certainly doesn't look like it. And then my other question is, you mentioned the National Youth Service in your presentation, and you mentioned that it was quite an important cog for youth development. There's been talk that as part of the National Youth Service, the military conscription is going to be introduced. Is this under serious consideration? And then you also mentioned that youth development was an...
Sorry, Pumzile, are you talking about the National Youth Service or military conscription?
There's been media reports that as part of the National Youth Service, there's talk of introducing compulsory military service.
So it's not something that's there, but there's been rumors.
And Dr. Hlagala was quoted in the media on it, so that's why I'm asking. Yeah. And then you mentioned that youth development was an unfunded mandate. Is that correct? So there's all these plans, but there's no funding. Thank you.
Honorable Member.
Thank you. Ndingunkosi uZwelivelile Mandela. Is seated or deployed in the National Assembly. Chair, let me first appreciate the presentations that have been put forward to us, and I'm happy that through your definition I'm still regarded as youth. But I must say that I've taken liberty to invite 10 learners from CPUT who come from Mvezo Traditional Council in Mvezo Komkhulu, Nelson Mandela's birthplace. And they are representing the youth of that rural community. So to the honorable member in absentia, Honorable Ndlozi, who says the youth are not represented here, I want to guarantee and assure the House that youth indeed are in attendance. But I want to really pose the question, Chair, in terms of the NDP, first of all, as to the bridge in between urban and rural divide. We are continuously witnessing that there is not much being done in terms of capacitating and training young people in rural areas. And therefore, the mindset is that given better opportunities and given greener pastures, there is a shift from rural to urban areas. I'd like to know what is being done to ensure that rural youth in particular are still regarded as citizens of this country and not second-class citizens, where they are not afforded opportunities in their own doorsteps from the rural background. Also, would like to understand as young people in rural areas as to, in terms of the NYDA, what programs are there that are being initiated for young people in rural areas. Particularly, we seem to see the programs focusing more on urban youth, and we are really being regarded as second-class citizens in this land of our forefathers. We would like to gain an understanding in terms of 2030 vision. Where will it be putting the young people in rural areas when we speak to the NDP? And lastly, Chairperson, in terms of training and capacity building, what is overall government message is in terms of prioritizing young people in rural areas to ensure that they are not left on the outskirts of development? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Member.
Thanks, Honorable Chairperson. My name is Lucizo Makubela Mashele, a member of Parliament in the National Assembly. My quick questions or comments around the presentation goes to the lady who's from the youth desk in the presidency, Dr. Hlakala. You've mentioned quick wins that the government can leverage and work to expand and absorb many young people into. And you've highlighted the rural youth, or the National Youth Service Corps, which resides in the Rural Development Department and then the TVET. Clearly, these show us that it's only perhaps these two departments that are in the forefront of absorbing young people into skills and development programs, which tells us that many departments are not taking youth development very seriously. They don't have radical programs or bold initiatives, as you have said. This might be because of the fact that youth in some departments, it's left out to those that will be willing to implement in the department, and it does not actually have the executive authority or people who will be following it up. Also, I believe that in portfolio committees, it's also left to those members of Parliament who will be willing to ask the question and probe into the departments to say how much of the budget has been spent on youth initiatives and youth programs. This then tells us that we don't have structures in place to actually take forward and look at youth programs and development with accounting authorities. Like, for an example now, you only have the Deputy Minister in the presidency who is overseeing issues of youth development. He's just the Deputy Minister. He's not a member of cabinet, because cabinet members are ministers, which then tells you that still we are lagging behind in implementation of radical youth development programs without even being able to follow the budget through into the other departments. I don't know whether it's perhaps the call for now for us to actually talk about having a fully fledged ministry that should take youth development to where we want to take it in the future. The plan or the 2020 policy plan speaks to good things, but who will be able to implement those in departments if you do not have somebody who will follow behind and see whether the budget has been spent on what has been planned. As a member of parliament, we've seen how easy accounting officers do violence on budgets where they don't have people or any person who will be asking why did this money shift from this program to this program. So that's my call as a young parliamentarian to say, should we not advocate for a youth ministry that would have executive authority, and a portfolio committee will be there to monitor and make sure that they hold the executive accountable in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last one from the 5.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'm Sean Daniels from Stellenbosch in the Cape Winelands. I have a few abbreviated questions I would like to put to the table. The Honourable Deputy Chair of the National Assembly stated that the conditions of farm workers. I would just like to highlight that to the youth of those farm workers. And I want to ask, what is the government, and that when I use the word government, it is local as well as national government's plan to assist better living, quality as well as education and the wealth of these farm workers so that they can support the youth living on that farms. That is minus the idea of land reform or land ownership. And then how will the youth benefit of the rural farming areas via the NYP as well as the NDP? And my question to that is that if, with all this said, is that is it government's idea to keep farm workers in the condition where they are? Or if it's not so, why are these farm workers still in the condition? Because I see a reverse cycle happening again, where youth can't complete their schooling, even though it's a no-fee schooling, but they can't complete their schooling, and then they need to go and work on farms. And with the current rate that farm workers are being paid, latch on to what Dr. Shlangala said about the 50,000 Rand per capita in 2010, but farm workers don't even earn 30,000 Rand per year, with 120 Rand per day wage. So, and giving access to land, especially to our young people, with proper maths and science is needed for the agricultural sector, and which is the primary sector of this country, which is our main food source. I start to question then, how is it possible if our math and science is not up to standard? How will these young people or people given farms being able to farm the land and actually produce quality for the country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For now, I would ask the presenters to answer questions, and I will do positive discrimination. The next lot that I'm taking are not members of parliament. Otherwise, we won't give an opportunity to others. Let me also say, colleagues, that I know some of the issues you have raised, you may not get answers to. I would also challenge you that you make proposals on how we go forward, because this is your forum in which you must actually input. For instance, some of the issues that came as questions, in my view, are issues where you can make propositions. I mean, there are issues, for instance, which other honorable members have raised to say from their own observation, there is lack of alignment even within government in terms of the implementation of the NDP. And I think you need to come up with concrete propositions rather than asking presenters. They won't be able to help you. They might say, we agree with you, and that's it. Secondly, some of the issues that you are raising require the member of the executive to answer to, which really would be unfair to ask administrators to answer. So I'm just cautioning you that some of those issues, don't feel bad if you don't get the response, and I wouldn't want to pressure the administrators to really answer some of the policy questions that will require your engagement. I would then also say some of the issues already start to veer on the proposals that may come from the commissions, issues of a youth ministry, but also issues of reporting, how accountability can be made, issues of the multi-party committee on youth. Some of those are concrete proposals on what needs to be done. I would allow
Thank you.
Doctor?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much for your invaluable input and comments. I think I want to agree with the Chairperson that some of the input made is for us to consider. For an example, the comment on the teaching of history in schools, indeed you are correct to say that we will need to update our history books. And the Department of Higher Education is already having strategies in place in terms of increasing the research output in order to ensure that there is relevant and more recent knowledge that is generated to address the needs, and that will also include even in the area of history. And the other issue was a concern raised on the issue of accountability. I think in my presentation I alluded to the fact that a high structure in the form of presidential working group on youth, which accounts directly to the president, has been established. And that is actually to track implementation and ensure that different key stakeholders, they are implementing what is provided for in the National Youth Development Policy and also in a way in the National Development Plan. And the various work streams that have been established, they consist of players from government, civil society, as well as the private sector. And then that means that implementation goes beyond government, and we actually are holding various role players responsible. I think that will be very clear when the integrated youth development strategy is finalized, because in the strategy we will be having different allocated responsibilities. So it will actually even be more clear, when our integrated youth development strategy is finalized. The issue of inclusive transformation, I'm sure you recall that when I was presenting, I also mentioned taking into account young people with disabilities. We welcome the fact that they have to be participating in our structures. And currently in the structure that I'm chairing on optimizing youth development machinery, we do have structures of young people with disabilities, represented. I think, the more they perform in all the work streams, the more the issues of young people with disabilities will be taken into account. And the private sector, yes, we have a challenge of drawing the private sector on board and making sure that they contribute towards youth development. And in our national youth policy, there's a proposal where we are proposing establishment of a youth development forum, which is going to be a structure between government and the private sector and civil society on youth development implementation. And then as and when we actually unpack the various action plans of the work streams, it will also be part of optimizing youth development machinery, because then there will be a dialogue in terms of what is the private sector actually contributing or committing with regard to youth development. So we think that structure will assist us in attracting the private sector. And There was also a comment that was raised that we have a collapse of good governance and that will actually prevent us from achieving on our objectives. When you talk about optimization of youth development machinery in the national youth policy, and when you talk about building the two pillars in the national development plan of building capabilities and building a capable and developmental state, you actually mean that you will be attracting human resources capacity to undertake the work. But it does not necessarily and exclusively refer only to warm bodies. It goes further to talk about ensuring that people who are in place have got the necessary skills. So that will also apply to the issue of youth development. For an example, we acknowledge as a youth sector that most of our organizations are collapsing because of financial mismanagement, for an example. And that will be an area where we will be building capacity for our youth workers so that they can properly manage the organizations of which they are part. So that is actually one way in which we will be dealing with. That is why we talk about having a youth work framework in place in order to address those issues. Lack of funds, yes, we said that funding is a problem, and we will be coming up with a business model on how we can actually motivate for funding of youth development priorities. For an example, in the current proposed National Youth Service National Youth Service framework that we are developing, we are talking about ring-fencing funds for youth development. So those are some of the strategies that we'll be using to ensure that there is budget that is earmarked exclusively for implementation of youth development programs. And, you know, the other one was in programs of youth development in rural areas. Rural youth, they are actually one of the target prioritized groups within the National Youth Policy. So whereas we say that the National Youth Policy addresses issues of young people, but then there are prioritized target groups such as young women, youth with disabilities, such as rural youth. So it is on that basis that we are saying that we are emphasizing a need for scaling up programs to target mainly even rural youth, and those will also include training and capacity building programs. The other issue was that only NARISEC is taking youth development seriously. There are many, NARISEC is one of the National Youth Service projects, but there are many initiatives by different government departments across board in terms of implementing youth development. So it's not only Department of Land Reform and Rural Development that has got initiatives for youth development, but then we are saying there's still scope for the departments to actually improve on those. For an example, my colleague is from small business development. You know, you've got youth cadres e-cadre program in Department of Communications. So, you know, there are many programs across board that actually are targeting youth development. The only thing that we need to do is to ensure that there is coordination. And I think that's all that I was supposed to respond on.
Well, I think the issues that were raised relating to conscription, I'm sure it's because of the old connotation that conscription or military conscription might mean. But as I said, that you want to clarify yourself there?
Thanks, Chairperson. I think if you're making reference to the article that came out in the City Press, there's no way we are saying as government that there's going to be compulsory military training. Actually, you should go back again to the article. What we are saying is that National Youth Service Program, we are expecting that we are going to expand it in a manner that all different government departments have to make sure that they have projects in place to attract young people, National Youth Service projects. And then we've got a standard, minimum standards of what we are regarding as National Youth Service. The programs will not only be exclusively for the South African National Defence Force. It will also be participating first as a service provider, providing character building and leadership training. But then again, if they choose to recruit young people, they will apply their own criteria in terms of recruiting those young people. But the National Youth Service will remain a voluntary program. Thanks.
So there is no conscription. It's National Youth Service. If you want Pumzile to debate, you can debate it outside. No. I think you can also debate it with her because it was her article. I just wanted clarity on that one so that we don't go with an impression that there's anything said about military conscription. It's National Youth Service, but across government departments. Honorable colleague, you have put, I can see, you've put your pillars there. There was a specific question asked by Mbele from you. If you can enunciate on those.
Okay, thank you, Madam. I think what's very important is from the range of projects we're actually engaging, if you look at the Mass Youth Enterprise Creation Program, you know, we seriously looking at implementing this for the next 10 years. We want to increase the number of youth entrepreneurs in the country, and we think that's a priority. So we're going to go at it for 10 years. I think in terms of the issue around mainstreaming, we really do believe that all organizations, state and private, need to look and focus on youth at the heart of their service delivery, of their focus in the economy. In terms of our sector-specific catalytic projects, I think it's very important that we must tap into the priority sectors as defined in the economy, because those priority sectors actually will give us the currency to create more jobs and add to GDP. The sort of high-impact Youth Month short-term projects, I think the very, very important thing about it is the fact that 90% of our youth suffer because of a lack of information. There is just no effective information as to what is available within the context of government that can support youth participation in the economy, youth access to services. In terms of our enterprise development workshops, I think it's very, very important that the three spheres of government need to have a joint expression of national, provincial, district, and municipal level projects. And we've been working for the last 14 quarters to try and make sure, okay, that this actually occurs. And then with your financial support instruments, I think access is extremely important, but the issue of collateral has still not been addressed because it's a major inhibiting factor of young people being able to participate.
Thank you very much. Honorable Tau. Tau, there was a specific question from you on farms or farm workers, which was asked by the young person from Stellenbosch.
No, thank you very much, House Chair. In actual fact, I treated it as a comment, as an issue that would, in actual fact, strengthen the argument that then begins to say, what is it that we need to do as Parliament to protect the vulnerable young people who ordinarily you would find in that particular sector? The extent of abuse that they are ordinarily subjected to. The systems that are being used as well, even to pay them, your DOP systems and all those kind of things. I made the point as an issue to be reflected upon in our commission so that we come out with a clear resolution that then says, as Parliament, what then becomes our position with regard to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me just say that there are certain issues that emerged. Van der Merwe, you'll forgive me, I won't point you on this one. I'll first prioritize, and maybe if you are lucky, but I'll first prioritize those ones that are not honorable members.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Sorry, I've seen you, next to you, behind you, the three gentlemen. And the last one there.
Chairperson, mine is just a short comment.
I will come back to you. Let me give priority to them. They've been very.
Chairperson, thank you very much. My name is Tulani Chefuta from Craddock in the Eastern Cape, representing South African Youth Council here. The first point that we want to make, Chair, is that the NDP is likely to be a victim of protracted consultation. In fact, many people think that by it being a vision statement 2030, we have 30 years to it. No, we have 15 years. And in all likelihood, you can't characterize 15 years as a long-term plan. So it's more shorter than what it is projected to be. And in fact, I think one of the things that Parliament must seek to push with all institutions that come to report to Parliament is that development does not have to be democratic. The right thing has to be done through implementing what will serve the people that have elected you to come and represent their interests here. So it does not have to be democratic. We don't have to agree, all of us. The second thing, Chairperson, is that even Census 2011 confirms that we have officially entered a demographic window of youth bulge. Now that presents us with two things, threats and opportunities. It presents us with opportunities only if we invest in the lives of young people now. We are beginning to see the threats that youth bulge is presenting us. The fact that you have young people readily available on the word go to be on the streets for service delivery, for being on the waiting list for housing in 1994, when some were even 5, that presents a challenge. The fundamental question is, when those young people are on the streets, there is somewhere where they should be, that they are not. There is something that they should be doing, that they are not. And we must actually accept the fact that with young people that are defined as need, not in education, not in employment, not in training, we are actually even likely to be sitting with 6 million compared to the 3 million and the 3.5 that is reported. Because that research studied young people between the ages of 18 and 24. So there are young people between the ages of 25 and 35 which have not been included there. And so the situation might actually be dire. Now that presents a high risk of instability in our society, including political instability for that matter. And so that has to be addressed significantly, Chairperson. There is a tool which all sectors of society have agreed on, which is the Youth Employment Accord. I want to make 2 examples of what the Youth Employment Accord agrees on. Okay, let me leave those ones. Let me make this last point. The presentation by Dr. Tlhagala completely ignores civil society in its equation on optimizing youth development machinery. And Chairperson, the NDP itself argues that the absence of broad partnerships with sectors of society is one of the main reasons for slow progress. But it goes on to call on leadership across all sectors of society. And so, there are programs that are inherently going to be suffocated if implemented by government. Some of those programs just need to be handed over with support to be implemented by civil society structures. Otherwise, if done by government, they will just be suffocated. They will not go anywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No. Next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Close yours. Yeah. It's me. Yeah. Thank you. I think maybe perhaps in complementing the president of SAIC, one discussion that we need to have one day, particularly in relating to youth development, vis-a-vis your NDP, it's your bureaucrats that seem to be an impediment towards development. The accord that the president of SAIC was talking about, it is gathering dust somewhere. If you go into the 6 commitments that are being made there, they are quite nice and beautiful to be implemented. But your bureaucrats in departments, they don't take it serious. Rather, what seems to be elevated is your employment tax incentive. Because some of them, given their ideological orientation or lack thereof, they don't see importance of implementing the Youth Employment Accord, but rather they prioritize the employment incentive. I want to make a clarion call and or a request to our young MPs to look between the prioritization of the employment tax incentive vis-a-vis your Youth Employment Accord. That's one clarion call that our young MPs and MPLs must look into. The second one, the same bureaucrats that in most instances they tend to advise politicians. We've been talking about youth set-asides for quite some time. I've been in the youth development space for 12 years. I remember in my first year we spoke about it. Until today we still speak about it. I know Polisa is nodding. She's now at MPL. During her time as a youth development activist, she was talking about the same thing. But you have some elements of our legislation like your preferential public procurement framework, your triple PFA. That seem, when you speak about set-asides, on the other hand, you can speak about them, write about them in the youth policy and the accord, but your triple PFA, it is not going to allow you to implement youth set-asides. Now you find that our policies, they don't talk to each other. Now I'm saying that, again, our youth MPs, they must be able to take and face, particularly your bureaucrats from National Treasury, that seemingly it's becoming now some sort of a prime minister's role within our country, because seemingly National Treasury remains untouched in this country. And it must be told that they are part of government, they were elected, they must deliver to our people. They must not they must not be a department that seems to impede development. I think in the main, those are the points, but the president has touched on the issue of civil society, Dr. Penis Lagola, that you have not mentioned, that the policy mentions in terms of optimizing participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hayi ningangxami nanku bese kulandela wena ke bhuti we jacket brown nalo ngapha kuwe nalo ngemva oneta brown and gold. Can you switch off your mic? Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, my first question is about the definition of youth. The first presenter, Dr. Tlangala, says youth starts at age 16. And then the last presenter says from 15 to 35. And when I look at the Constitution, section 28, subsection 3, it defines a child as any person under the age of 18 years. So where do we draw the line when it comes to the definition of youth? And then my second point is, I come from a province, the Northern Cape, where youth unemployment is the highest in the country. And earlier this year, when the provincial treasury presented its APP, I then inquired about the plans of that department in relation to the implementation of the NDP. The department, in response to my question, says it does not have a budget, or it did not make provision for implementation of the NDP. Now, what the department basically says to me is that there is no intention to implement NDP, especially in the light of the high unemployment unemployed youth in the province. And then lastly, Dr. Tlangala speaks of the social ills, alcohol abuse, drug abuse amongst youth. To what extent are public entities like your provincial liquor boards, when it grants liquor licenses, to what extent are those entities also contributing to the social ills associated with alcohol abuse? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Okay, Enkosi ma'am. My name is Sabelo Mkojwa, a mine worker.
Okay, Sabe.
Enkosi ma'am. Let me start with the presidents. The presidents spoke about youth and economy, youth and education. Let me start by saying, in most cases in South Africa, for an example, our minerals are being processed outside the country. And I think we must change. And in changing, we need to be very, very careful, because not everything will be according to our wishes. For an example, the countries where we are processing the minerals are not going to allow that change easily. We need to maybe say, we must take young engineers in the country and go be trained outside the country, so that we've got people that can be able to process the minerals in the country. Secondly, the issue of education. The private companies are doing less while they are the most beneficiaries in our education. How do we then bring a legislation that will force them to pay for our education? We must not only say it's government that must pay for free education in South Africa, but the private companies in a form of bringing legislations. We are also saying our country has got a shortage of universities and colleges. The same private companies, we must find a better way of forcing them in a form of social labor plans to build more schools and universities and training centers in our country. Let me also come to what the chair spoke of when he was talking about the multi-party forum. I think we must come to a conclusion that says we've got enough organizations in the country. We've been seeing a lot of organizations, and I think they are enough. So we've got youth presidents. How do we then capacitate that youth presidents without adding more for youth formations that at times are not assisting? My proposal would be, let us capacitate the youth presidents. Let me pause there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next to you.
Thank you very much, Mama Wanbulise. My name is Vuisa Konzani. Lucky me, I'm not a member of parliament, but a mine worker. I will not pose questions, but I will have inputs to the presentation by a doctor from the president's, Dr. Hlakala. In your presentation, you have mentioned in one slide that there are some challenges facing young people in this country. The problem that we are facing currently as young people is that the development that we are talking about focuses more on economic growth, of which we always think that it will create more jobs for young people. What we need to pose is the change in terms of development. I think we need a more basic need approach development, where it will empower young people and make them participate in their development. By doing so, we'll be able to alleviate poverty, just because young people will not go out there and be job seekers, but they will create employment and job for others. Secondly, you spoke about the status of youth at glance. You spoke of young people without matric, which constitute 65%. we are saying as young minors that public FETs are there for those who have not matrix, and even those who have passed matrix, due to the fact, if you are looking at our economy, the key drivers of our economy are the skills from the public FETs, the artisans, and so forth. So while we are calling for making education fashionable, we appeal to young people to go and study those scarce skills in the public FETs. We appeal to government to invest more to those who goes to these FETs. On the other hand, the private sector is the most beneficiary on our graduates from these FETs and other institutions of higher learning. So if there can be a law or an act that will be enforced where private sector will be taxed for education tax, that education tax will be used to assist those who cannot afford to go to these public FETs and other institutions, due to the fact that the money that is being generated through the state is not enough to send our young people to go to school and have these qualifications that are needed. Lastly, Chair, there's also the key issue that we need to address is the kind of the framework of our education system. Our education system must talk to the development that we want to see in our country. Currently, the education system that we are using, if you are doing accounting, all those economies, it talks to profit. You must go and make a business and make profits. It doesn't talk about the human factor, which is the people on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The gentleman behind you here, Baba.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Takarani Mbengeni, the national chairperson of the South African Youth Cooperatives. I would like to not pose questions, but to rather at least, in fact, highlight areas that I think are important for us to, in fact, implement to assist the process. This will be, in fact, obviously in line with the Cooperative Amendment Act 6 of 2013. We believe that we need to make a call for the total breakdown for the youth participation in the economy, which will in fact also flag out the percentages or a figure, so that in as much as we talk about the youth development, we must be able also to outline areas or percentages that are in fact put aside for the young people's involvement within the economy, understanding the fact that the 30% as part and parcel of the state of the nation addressed by the president is also reflecting that. But we think that from the cooperative development aspect, we need to at least in fact have something else that primarily speak to that. We also in fact think that we need to call for the rehabilitations of all the apartheid infrastructures that are in fact currently in fact sitting as just white horse in our communities, for them to be in fact be reutilized back to their own particular original character, so as to make sure that we are able to in fact enhance development and also youth participation within the community. We have seen many colleges, like your nursing colleges and also agricultural colleges, and also teaching colleges that have not necessarily in fact been within the particular framework at the current moment, although in fact the government is trying something on that. But we are thinking that from a cooperative point of view, those become the primary centers that development is in fact going to be sought to be possibly observed. The other aspect that we think that it is quite much more important is that we need to create a community-based development in a form of a cooperative in all existing sectors of the economy. When we talk about agriculture as a sector, we shall have, in fact, at least something concentrated with quotas within that particular kind of an area that speaks about the youth involvement at agriculture, the youth involvement at IT, the youth involvement in manufacturing, the youth involvement in all those particular existing sectors that are there within the government, according to ministerial set-asides. So we are believing that as Sanako Youth, ours will be to make sure that there has to be also full capacitation and also including research and benchmarking from other particular countries that are successful on that particular kind of an area, so as to make sure that at least there is a possibility, feasibility study on that particular aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now take 5 hands, only young women on the right. That lot was all men, young men, so I'm now biased. Women, 1. Any other women taker, 2?
Which definition of young are you using, Chair? Is it
I'm
a
using-
parliament?
I am using the international young parliamentarians age of 45 and under. Sorry, there's 1, 2, you had your hand earlier. Are you still wanting to speak or you are covered? Okay, thanks. So 1, where was number 2? Or you move there, 2 and then Van der Merwe and then, hello? Oh, 5, Iza phambili asikuboni Iza. Otherwise you'll be missed, you are the last one. And you must come here because I don't think there are mics there at the back. Hey, young lady. Oh, Isaac. Okay, you can start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Councillor Nozbele Makanda from the Eastern Cape, the chairperson of the Community Development Working Group of Salga and Executive Mayor of Lukanji local municipality. I would like to welcome the presentations as made and join the rest of the speakers that have engaged on them to say, indeed, from the presentation, you are getting a sense that you are coming into grips as a nation on what needs to be done. And it would seem that we do have a common understanding and that the youth being the majority of the population should then retain the focus. I share the same concerns from what has been raised, but I won't repeat what has been raised around some of the gaps that we have. But as Salga, one of the elements that are of concern that we're currently working on as far as the NDP is concerned is the institutional arrangements that are linking the local level with the province as well as the national, wherein coordination at IGR level remains a challenge. And I think as long as coordination of what is done is not really at where it should be, the frustrations will continue to persist. The silo mentality within the departments, even at municipal level, remains a challenge, wherein it becomes difficult to actually pin out the mainstreaming issues to the key performance areas of the respective directorates. And then at IGR level, wherein planning should be consolidated such that when interventions are being made, there is a joint venture. Now you will find a number of the municipality having its own programs on the youth, Department A and Department D having their own separate programs and sometimes targeting the same youth in a particular sector. And therefore, collaboration with business as well is key, with NGOs as well as with the cooperative movement is one of the key areas wherein we would be able to achieve success as far as this one is concerned. Developing approaches to local government capacity for youth development in local government at that level and bringing all the interventions down to the local space wherein the municipalities are seen as the center of coordination of what then would happen in that space. And that would improve the reporting and actually getting statistics on exactly how or what targets we've been able to achieve as government. But role clarification becomes key in terms of all the role players, and I totally agree with all the civil society organizations that should be playing a role. We currently have a concept of anti-poverty war rooms that are ward-based. And I think that concept as a mechanism of government coordination is one of what we should be emphasizing in youth intervention, in fact intervention on all sectors, so that the anti-poverty war room concept that is already taking root in KZN and in the Eastern Cape is one of the vehicles within which then government coordination, so that we're able to reach the rural youth. There is another concept, Madam Chair, of
Eyokugqibela leyo le.
yes, asset-based community planning, wherein at IDP level, communities are able to realize their asset, so that agricultural communities can plan around agricultural activities, wherein you'll be able to have your youth actually getting involved in agricultural activities through co-ops. And we have that already starting to take root. And what needs to be done is the consolidation of the work and the intervention programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Nzabuya ngawe Pinky, nsaqala ngapha.
Ke a leboga modulasetilo, leina la ka ke Nkagisa Mokgosi, Member of Parliament, ke tswa Northern Cape Kurumane kwa Motlharo. Ke rata gore NDP
Sisi, I know 11 languages
it's my mother tongue.
Yes, I'm just worried. I'm looking at my secretary to see whether
I will
they
try and mix
translate.
here and there.
It's okay. Translation, can people, it's not there?
Order, Chair. Yes, I just want to assist you to correctly proceed in terms of chairing this session. When we started with this session, there was a question that was asked by Honorable Dow as to whether there will be members who will need interpretation. So we can't want to raise it as an issue now when we are already in the middle of discussions. Let's proceed in the manner that we have already started, with due respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I was here in the beginning. The issue was relating to sign language. It wasn't about interpretation. But nonetheless, I would allow you to mix languages as you indicated you will, and apologize to members that you will not be able, those of you who don't know Tswana, to be able to pick up because we don't have simultaneous translation at the moment.
NDP, ke rata gore ko NDP, it will never be a strategic vision for South Africa until 2030. Because ga e bue ka lehatshe, ga e bue ka mbu. The implementations tsa rena tse le tlabeng le di dira, mbu lo beile kae. Ga e bue ka free, quality, well-resourced education. Ka gore re bua ka bašwa gompieno, bašwa ba ba tlhokang thuto. Ga e bue ka minimum wages in the mining, agriculture, private security, domestic work, petrol attendants, public servants, and other essential sectors, where the majority of black people are employed. Hashtag black people first. Hashtag land first. Only a radical economic policy direction will rescue South Africa from its downward spiral. And sewa ga nkitla se diragala le ga le 2030 ke kgakala. Ke sure gore nako wa EFF e tla be leader. Re tla rescue South Africa. Ke a leboga.
Honorable van der Merwe.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, and greetings to everybody. I'm Liesel van der Merwe, I'm a Member of Parliament. Chairperson, I'm going to respect your ruling and not be too long. I think us young parliamentarians have got opportunities and platforms at various portfolio committees to raise issues of concern. But I think fundamentally some of the issues that are of concern for me has been raised, but at this stage in our country, the failure of our economy to be a robust economy means that more and more young people are reliant on grants. And the more and more people are reliant on grants, we are actually creating a welfare state instead of moving towards this vision of a developmental state, which is one of the concerns that I have. Secondly, South Africa is very good in creating plans. We are very good in coming up with good plans. We've had Agisa, we've had GEAR, but we're not very good with implementation. And at the end of the day, it comes down to political will and whether we've got the budget and funds to do so. And I think that's also one of the concerns for me. The issue that's been raised in terms of the youth ministry, we as the IFP Youth Brigade, we've always championed the youth ministry, but just think about the example of the Department of Women, Children and People with Disabilities, which became a standalone department previously. but because of a lack of funding, it could not execute its duties. So again, it comes down to political will and funding. And secondly, maybe also lastly, just to say to the Honourable Tao that while we appreciate this platform for us as young people to get together, to discuss issues of importance, I think we're not doing justice to the grave challenges faced by young people by only allowing us to engage for an hour or two. Just maybe a suggestion for discussions going forward. We really need more platforms like these where we as young people can get together, share issues, and also come up with plans forward, because it means that we are taking responsibilities for our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The young lady there.
Sorry, Masibonge Zondane Kumvezo. My question, I'll pose my question to Umamhlakala. I'd like to take you back to slide 17 with heading Way Forward. We need everyone involved. Bullet 2, it says all key sectors should be mobilized for youth development. As an upcoming development practitioner, in tourism development studies, we are told that key stakeholders in development or key sectors are your public sector, which is the government, your private sector, and the community. So I'd like to know if are all those three key stakeholders represented here? Is our government here? We know it's here. The private sector, it looks like it's represented. The community, because the community, from my understanding, is the main key stakeholder, because there is no development without the community. They have the land, they have the main resources of development. So is the community represented? We can't say it's represented by the lady next to me here, because maybe she's from the Eastern Cape, but her job is, she is here. Does she go back to the community? And we need an active participant of the community. Is the community directly represented here? That's.
Thank you very much. Pinky, you are the last one.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, I would like to indicate that I'm a member of Parliament here in Cape Town. My name is Pinky Mukoto. I'm from the Northwest. Before I go any further, I wish to welcome the presentations that have been made. And I appreciate that the few departments that have come here, at least their presentation reflect what young people have always wanted. Acknowledge the fact that there can be challenges that are being experienced in the implementation of the youth policy and other programs designed for young people. But everything else that has been put forward is as a result of consultations, the many consultations and forums that have been held that have highlighted the will of the young people, that have represented the views of the young people of South Africa. But I also want to raise my concern on the absence of the key departments, especially the economic departments that are there in the country, like DTI, like Department of Rural Development, and others, which I think, even the Department of Basic and Higher Education, I thought that they would be here to listen quite frankly to what are the new developments as it relates to young people. My greatest concern, Chairperson, is the role of youth bodies in terms of mobilizing young people towards accessing the opportunities that are there for young people. Of course, as government, there are programs and budgets that we have set aside to make sure that they are able to cater for the needs and the desires of young people in the country, whether it can be economic empowerment, education, and other programs. But always we find that as members of parliament, there are rollovers that are there. And you ask yourself whether the government should be the referee and the player at the same time. We have to adopt those budgets. We have to agitate for those budgets to be kept at that level, because we know that even if there can be under expenditure, the young people still exist. You cannot call for a cut in that budget. But youth formations fail to carry out their mandate and responsibility of making sure that they show the young people where the opportunities are, where the bursaries are. We always find it difficult at the beginning of the year, hearing young people rising and agitating for the increase in the bursaries.
Summarize it, Pinky.
So I think it's one area that we have to look at on our role as young people, and vis-a-vis our role as young members of parliament who are responsible for doing oversight and agitating for the representativity of budgets, you know, to get towards young people, to be get towards young youth programs. The other point that I think is quite key.
That's the last one.
Yes, relates to the issue of communication that was also raised by the speaker. The speaker spoke about the issue of the digital divide. And I think because South Africa is one of the first countries to be to use technology better than other countries, and one country where we have been able to reach a point where we are able to bridge that digital divide. I find it that most of our young people do not use that facility quite effectively to make sure that they get empowered. Most of the time what happens is that I don't know what to say, Chairperson, but I think that the issue of communication is quite key, and as young people, we must ensure that we get our young people to use the social media platforms that are available to empower themselves, so that they are able to even get into grips with what government is planning and having as programs for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I have to curtail people as they were making their important points. The challenge we have is that the staff in the kitchen also have to close. Lunch was supposed to be at 1. And I appreciate that we started a bit later, but we also try to make sure that as much as is possible, a lot of you do make your points. I just want to say one of the things that came clear in this discussion is that time is against us. Vision 2030 actually is effectively 15 years, not more. Also, there were certain issues that were raised, which in my view, I think I must suggest that members need to make those as part of the resolution so that we don't forget them, that came as proposals. There were also issues that were raised around what are other platforms that we need to take into consideration, such as the African Agenda 2063, the Interparliamentary Union, Young Parliamentarians report and what it said, so that as we look at 2030, we also are mindful of what could be possible alignments. Issues of multi-party youth forum, committee, I just wanted to clarify, it's not a new organization, but it's to ensure that within Parliament, you can have a structure where young parliamentarians from all parties that are represented in Parliament can have a forum where they can engage, so that the issues that you raised today and which you will continue to raise, they can actually be processed. So that was really an issue I wanted to clarify. But again, what became clear is the importance of education as we go forward, issues of legislative review that was also raised by members. I must say the issue of reporting, but the interesting part for me was what the president of the South African Youth said, democracy, development does not always require democracy. It's an issue we'll debate on your own. Very bold statement. But also some of the issues that emerged, I think to the organizers, it requires more information. Issues that were raised around beneficiation, actually there was a decision taken by government in going that route. So the question may be, how do we implement issues of training mineral engineers and meteorologists? I know the Department of Minerals have actually for some time now having scholarships with University of Witwatersrand in particular to make sure that those young people who want to go into that field can be supported. But there are a range of issues which are an indication of the need for further engagement among ourselves so that we can give particular proposals to those who are in the legislature. The role of youth organizations, civil society in particular, was also raised. Young lady from VES, the development practitioner. Indeed, community is involved. Precisely that you are here now, Winch. Nalaba bantu or young South African youth, no, it's a SAY? Yes. So I don't think there's a continuum where committee starts and ends. We may be in the respective roles, but a majority of you who are neither in state responsibility or private sector represent the community. Unless we would want to define community in a much more succinct way, maybe that might be an issue for definition as commissions engage amongst themselves. After lunch, we will go to the commissions. The venues are V226, S26, S35 in the old assembly chamber. I hope there will be ushers to assist so that those who are not in this parliament often will be directed where to go. Commission 1 will deal with the role of young elected representatives in the implementation of the NDP and the youth policy. Venue is 226, V226. The facilitator will be Mr. Adam Lotto, and the rapporteur will be Honorable B. Jean Tebe. Commission 2 will be linking municipal planning framework with NDP for youth inclusion. Actually, the issue that was raised by the executive mayor, which deals with issues of congruence, particularly in terms of our structures of governance and community, becomes very important. That will be in S26 rather. And the facilitator is Councillor Makanda, rapporteur Councillor Mashimbe. Commission 3, strengthening capabilities of youth through sports, arts and culture will be in S35. Facilitator is Honorable D.M. Stock, rapporteur Honorable J.J. Lond or Land? Lond. Well, it looks like there's another Commission 4, which will be in this house, in the old assembly, Health and Social Transformation Advancement through the NDP. The facilitator will be Honorable Makeleni and rapporteur Honorable Mike Waters. Cameroon, are you the one chairing the health? Youth, sports and culture. Cameroon Dagmore is the facilitator. Thank you very much. Let me just say that there might have been changes, but communication was made to the specific people who have got the responsibility, so they will do so. Yes, Mpele?
Chair, sorry, it sounds like the communication did not come through to the organizers. Honorable Waters is sick.
Okay. Okay. So uzawumela mntakwethu?
I wasn't planning
Okanye
to.
ufandami phumzini nguwe ozawurapportia or
Okay, Nzoyenza.
between the two of you.
Okay,
Okay, but one must remain.
Yeah.
Colleagues and members, thank you very much for this session. Our lunch will be in the old assembly, so we'll go out here to our left, straight to the restaurant. I will ask the rapporteurs and facilitators to remain.